I just want to introduce Hannah a little bit. Dr. Hannah Carter is the, I want to get the chair of, no, dean of the University of Maine Cooperative Extension program up there. Anyway, Hannah has actually become quite a friend of us. If you watch TV over the past summer, we had some spots, some television ads that discussed IPM, and Hannah was our spokesperson for those 3 different spots. And we appreciate her work on that and her willingness to help us out. So anyway, so with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Hannah, and hope you all have a good time. Thank you all.
Well, and again, thank you so much, Dawn, for the opportunity. I just did share my screen. Hopefully you can all see it. Yep. Awesome. I welcome the opportunity, I think, just to make the face-to-face, even if as much as it is virtually, connections with members of this industry, because it's near and dear to my heart. You're going to hear in a moment why. And just talk a little bit about, as we are now almost a year into this pandemic, I am annoyingly optimistic and positive. And even though life certainly has changed, I think as industries and as a state, we need to look at what we're going to do to actually find some of the positives in this pandemic. And again, think about the future and what changes did we have to make because of the pandemic that may actually influence how we move forward. And again, whether it's this industry or agriculture as a whole, or even our state. So again, just really welcome the opportunity to be here with you all. And certainly this is not a canned presentation. Anytime you want to interject, ask a question, argue with something I've said, I'm way open to it. This is more of a discussion because I'd love to learn from you all, as well as again, just share some of my thoughts as we've moved forward. I always feel like I have to have a purpose or have to have a goal for our time together. And again, I don't know if you all have heard this, and again, I don't know if Winston Churchill it's attributed to or whoever, but we've certainly heard over and over again to never let a good crisis go to waste. And maybe that's, I know in extension, we've made some changes that actually we've probably had to have made even years ago, but because of the pandemic, they brought them to the forefront. And so we're really looking at what have we learned from COVID, and what does it mean to go forward in whatever new world that we live in. So again, just really want to talk about the industry, and I do have some questions for you that I'd love to hear more about, and just as we think about moving forward, what this all looks like. I do have to say thank you, as Dawn mentioned. I was a little bit taken aback when I got his email saying, hey, we'd love for you to do these 3 IPM spots for us. I tried to argue a little bit and say I'm not the right person and all of these things, but he won me over. And so in April, about a month into COVID, I traveled down to Portland and worked with a phenomenal, whoever your team was to put these commercials together. They were extraordinary to work with. We filmed them in an afternoon at our Tidewater Gardens, our extension gardens in Portland. And I learned a lot through this process. Number one, people watch the local news. Now, people may say local news is dead, nobody watches it in real time. I will argue with that because I got more comments either in the morning or in the evening. Number one, some people didn't realize I had moved back to Maine, and here I am appearing on a commercial. And number two, a lot of people would say, I heard your voice in my kitchen and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from as I was making dinner. And so I just, again, it seems like they were well received, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to participate, because it was actually one, as I look back at 2020, it was one of my highlights of just something fun to do. So I, again, really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for that. As Dawn did mention, I am Dean of Cooperative Extension, but I do feel like it's important to kind of tell a story because it's going to lead up to why, even though I've just got back to Maine in 2019, why I have an affinity for the nursery, landscape, and garden center industry. So bear with me for a minute because I like to tell a story. I'm originally from Washburn, Maine, so about 3 hours north of here. My dad was a potato farmer, so I grew up on a farm. And really just had a love early on of plants. honestly, between my dad's farm and my grandparents' gardens and whatnot. I loved the idea of growing things. I mean, I just feel, my sister says I'm an agricultural nerd, and I'm okay with that. Of course, that led me to 4-H in Aroostook County, and again, 4-H opened a lot of doors for me that I'm not sure as a kid in Aroostook County would have gotten. And I'm just really thankful for that opportunity. And I always say 4-H helped build the person that I am today, and certainly has helped influence my career as well. That led me to, after a few years of working for Extension in the Presque Isle Extension office, I went on to get a master's degree at the University of Florida. And it's interesting, I never thought about going to Florida. I never thought about staying in Florida or anything like that. But I got my master's degree in extension education because I love that idea of how do we help people grow things better. And that was really my frame of reference. Is I worked at our local extension office answering questions, helping farmers, helping homeowners, and I loved that model. And I wanted to learn more about it. And again, had an extraordinary time at Florida. I came home for a year after my master's degree and got a call from my advisor asking me to come back to start a PhD. I never thought about going on for a PhD or anything like that. He called in February, which February in Aroostook County. Going back to Florida didn't seem like a bad idea. And so I went back and got my PhD in all things of agricultural leadership. My dad, my potato farming father, as you can imagine, thought there is no such degree as agricultural leadership, and that I was completely wasting my time and some of his money in doing so. My friends all teased me saying, you're going to go teach cows how to be outstanding in their field. What about? Like, it's just, but it's an idea that really struck me of, let's look at the agricultural sector and how do we prepare folks who are coming into agriculture, folks that are into agriculture, how do we prepare them to meet the challenges of today? And the challenges of today are not what our parents' generation and grandparents' generation had to deal with when they were working in ag. And, you know, how do we, communication skills, decision-making skills, policy skills, all of those things. And so I loved my degree program because I got to work within Florida agriculture, which is an awesome industry. If you think about the diversity of Florida ag, 320 different commodities that are grown there. And I got to work with people within the industry. So as much as I thought I was going to come right back to Maine after I finished, I actually stayed in Florida until 2019. So I was there 20 years total. The majority of my time after graduation, I spent directing an agricultural leadership program, a statewide agricultural leadership program called the Wedgeworth Leadership Institute. And again, just worked with agricultural leaders across the state. And it was the best job in Florida. I said that. The only reason, or the only thing that could lure me away from that job, was the ability to come home and help agriculture here. What I want to say is, while I spent my time working in Florida, and I was telling Don this prior to starting, I did a lot of work with FNGLA, which is Melna's equivalent in Florida, the Florida Nursery Growers and Landscapers Association. I did so much work with them, they actually made me an honorary staff member of their organization. So I feel a real deep affinity for folks who are in this industry. And again, I will say yes every time I can when asked to do something for you all and to support your efforts, because again, I just have a real love and appreciation for this industry. So I moved back to Maine after 20 years of being away. And while Maine, I think this is one of the things we love about Maine, it stays a lot the same. Being gone 20 years, there was a lot for me to learn, to refamiliarize myself with just the roads and the counties, with where the industries are, what's going on in agriculture in the state, where the issues are. Yeah, it was a huge learning curve. And then, oh, by the way, 10 months into a new job, a global pandemic happens, which nobody has had a playbook for. So it's been an interesting year and a half, as it has been for everybody. I say this, and I've said it out loud, and I always say this disclaimer. Again, we didn't see COVID happening. We didn't, I think we were all the same, oh, a month or two, we'll be back to normal. And here we are almost a year in. I don't want to discount the incredible loss of life and how this pandemic has impacted people. their health, their welfare, their families, and all of that. On the other side of that, though, it has been an incredible positive for the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. I like to say we became the state's Google. And I think this has a lot of connections with your industry as well. What did people do? They went outside. People started gardens that never had gardens before. Well, how do you do that? And so people remembered, oh, by the way, there's this thing called extension, and they'll help us and they'll provide the information. And oh, while we're on the extension website, what we found as we've looked at some of the analytics now, they may have come to learn how to grow a plant, but they stayed. And once they got on our website, they learned more. And once they participated in one of our programs, they're like, well, what else is there to do? And they participated in more. And so I've just been, as I said, it's been a heck of a year, but extension, we've never had the audience that we've had until the pandemic. I share this because many of you have participated in in-person extension meetings, and sometimes you may get 5 people, sometimes you may get 30 or whatnot. We have one of our long-term extension employees who's been teaching canning to audiences in the winter times for 30 some years, and she's been doing it, and boy, did she embrace technology. And this winter, one of her canning workshops had over 100,000 interactions online. She went viral, and she's just like, she's beside herself. And again, I think that's where, what are we doing to capture some of that? And again, once the pandemic's over, much like many of you all in your industry, is like, how do we keep our customers coming? What did we provide that other people weren't? Like, it's very interesting to think about, what is this going to look like? And again, how do we capture some of this and make it part of our normal after the pandemic is over? Hopefully many of you are aware that we do quite a bit in the gardening landscape, no pun intended, but what's been wonderful that we found within Extension is we've had teams of people working together that had never worked together before, and that's been great. And again, I know you all, I'm speaking to the choir in this one. I mean, to find plant materials, to find other materials was a real hardship this spring once everybody got outside and kind of got into their gardens and whatnot. So we're looking forward to what this next growing season looks like, as I'm sure you all are too. And again, what changes can we make? What's going to be our ability to help people? What is our interaction going to look like, and those type of things. And this is where, again, feel free to chime in, because this is just kind of Hannah's frame of reference when I think about positives that could have impacted this industry. Obviously, increased interest in home gardens, of getting out, of making homes and businesses and whatever more beautiful, increased that people wanted to get away from screens, and so spending time outside and again, maybe tending to their garden. Certainly with that became the increased knowledge and information. I think everybody was having to stop to answer questions, embracing new ways of learning, of shopping. There's a lot of conversations around what does this look like in the future, and of doing business. And I know a lot of the small businesses, certainly in this industry, had to take on a lot of new things just to, again, try to make the 20 growing season worthwhile. There's this increased travel in state, but desires to go do things and go see things. The increased interest and desire to buy local, that's one of the things I think everybody's hoping for, that again, once the pandemic is over, that will still be part of what people want to do, is they want to support their local businesses. The increased belief that plants will improve a quality of life. And again, I think that's important as we think about where our joy, where does our joy come from? What can we do to get away from technology and these screens? And then certainly new partnerships and collaborations where, we may have to come together to figure out how to respond to this, or maybe we can, use our garden center in another way. It's just really interesting to think about, okay, what have the positives been in regards to this. Obviously, with that, conversely, there are some negatives that have gone along with it as well. And again, I may not have a whole list. I'd love to hear what some of the negatives are. You know, disruptions in markets have been a huge one. I know that was early on. A lack of product, where to source things. The increased safety measures for both employees and for customers, and what does that look like? Some people couldn't find help. And again, that goes along with the issues of when we find help, how do we keep people safe? Where do we source material from? The increased competition for your time. And I feel like that's an important one that we don't acknowledge is as we were trying to run businesses, as we're trying to do our jobs and think about these new ways of thinking and new modes of operation, some things had to be let go. And again, whether it was personal or professional, we just couldn't do it all. And again, there's probably others that I haven't thought about. And so I know we have a smaller group, but I would just be interested is what have some of the other impacts, both positive and negative, been on this industry?
Coming from a company where I do the hiring, it was very difficult to get anybody to apply that was serious with the added unemployment from the government. It made it a little sweeter for people to not apply. It was very difficult. We finally started to get some quality applicants around August for landscaping. That's a little late in the season, but we ended up getting a nice batch of people, mostly from the restaurant industry. And then we just had to train them. And so far, and I'm hoping that they'll stay because we've been working on building our company culture and trying to educate our employees so they feel valued and that they're working towards something. But that was one of the major issues for us was the lack of staff. So we had plenty of work, but we didn't have enough people to do the labor to get as much income as we wanted.
Now, Lee, do you think these folks will stay with you, hopefully, on the long term?
I think there's a percentage. A few of them have already found new jobs since the season ended and we haven't had much snow. But we were just checking in with everybody again because we're now back into hiring for the upcoming season and we need to know how many openings we need to fill. And it looks like we have a good group of people coming back that did join on towards the end of the season. So I'm hopeful and hoping that we did a good enough job to keep them interested. And there's plenty of overtime during the season too. So there's a good opportunity for people to make money working for us. So I think it's probably at least a 50% return rate on those new people, which is better than in the past.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear. And I know certainly other industry groups talked about the same thing, was that extra unemployment incentive made it hard once people did get back kind of full operation after they figured out how to address, all the issues of March and April and May. So good. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
And we're going to talk about this of kind of long-term effects and what does this look like. And it's interesting. I did yesterday, I joined into one of the first sessions of the trade show, I think where Scott Longfellow was talking about kind of impacts in his garden center and again, how to address some of those things. And it's, it depends on the business model. And I appreciate you talking about your company culture because that speaks to my leadership heart and whatnot is what can we do as a business? What do we have the capacity to do? And again, I think one of the things about COVID, and I know this happened to me in my position, is we seemed like, at least this is personally, in the first 8 months or so, everything was so reactive because we were reacting to guidelines, we were reacting to protocols, we were reacting to all these things. We didn't have any chance to be proactive, to really think about what does this mean, next month, or what does this mean next year? And so I feel like maybe now, at least, again, this is from my perception, is that we are being a little more proactive in our thinking. And maybe that's because, we're finally thinking about maybe the end of this, or at least enough people being vaccinated that we can get past where we are right now. Irene, did you have a comment? I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I was just thinking that from our perspective at the Botanical Gardens, we have gained more interest of people wanting to take classes in horticulture and gardening, particularly since we're offering it online now. So that way we opened up a new door of students, so.
And that's
great.
And I think that's a great that's great to mention, because that's where I feel like, all right, partnerships, like, because we put our Master Gardener volunteer program all online. And what I love about it is, prior to me coming here, and I spoke to the former John Rebar, who was the former extension director, I spoke a couple months into the pandemic, and he's like, Hannah, how did you do it? And I was like, John, it only took a global pandemic, because they said, oh, we can never put a Master Gardener program, training program online. Well, we did. And is it as good as the in-person? I think there's good pluses and minuses to that, but we're able to train up more people and have more people participate. And again, I think some of those partnerships, like, are there collaborations? I mean, I'm even thinking this from an extension perspective, like, are there collaborations that we can have with, botanical gardens or garden centers or different businesses and whatnot? Because again, we're looking at, this interest in outdoors and in gardening. So I think there's a lot of potential there.
And I wonder the sustainability or the continuity that people will take who were, interested, like, immediately, but then how long will that, people ask, especially in the nursery trade, how long will this last as far as market sales and Lee's clients? Like, will she have as many people in the future demanding, more gardening jobs, or is it going to kind of go by the wayside after 2 or 3 years again? So it's, what I mean? It's kind of a human behavioral observation right now.
Right. And I think this is going to be huge. There's going to be a lot of studies on this, because I mean, they say 21 days to make a habit. And, now we're almost a year into all sorts of new habits forming. And so I think it will be interesting to see if, again, this year kind of mimics last year, where people just got outside as soon as they could. I mean, I have to think that it would. And again, what the staying power of some of these things are. I think, so certainly we have COVID happening, but there's been a lot of other things that's happening in Maine currently. And then we're going to think a little more long-term, that I feel are going to have impacts on us all. And so I think they're important to also think about. Obviously, the governor had an economic recovery committee that she stood up this summer. I had the ability to actually help out one of the subcommittees that had to do with kind of the natural resource-based industries. And again, there's a lot of recommendations in the final report that are going to have some direct impact on the ag industry here in the state. If, again, where's the money coming from? That's the, $1 million question. But there could be, if there are some money to support some of the recommendations. I really feel like it might address, some of the infrastructure needs that we see here in the state and some of the other issues. And how do we build up? I think this is the other thing, and why I love being back in the state, is we have such an entrepreneurial and innovative small business mindset here. We start small businesses, we grow small businesses, and what can we do to support the folks that want to do this? And again, I had a chance to help out after I transitioned from the natural resources side of things into the innovation and entrepreneurship side of things. And I feel like that's where folks in agriculture, I mean, they've been innovating since day one. And so I think there's going to be some possibilities there. I really think, again, once we get past COVID and we start looking at other issues that are happening, climate change is going to be very interesting, because obviously we have a new federal government as of about 2 hours ago who made climate a priority. It's a priority at the global level. And again, I feel like Maine is actually going to be out in front of a lot of other states. I come from Florida, where for 8 years under Governor Rick Scott, who's now a senator in Florida, as a state employee, we could not say climate change out loud in an email, it did not, I mean, that was his administration's response to it. And so we do know that there are changes in climate, and because of that, there are opportunities. I think before we started, Lee, I heard you talking about, probably it's like Maine native plants or planting Maine natives. I think there's going to be much more interest as we look at, again, consumers and their spending priorities. It's going to be, how do we save the environment? How do we do good? The millennials all want to do good and whatnot. But I think there's a lot of opportunities as we think about our businesses and how we are going to respond and make an impact in climate change. Obviously, the state, at some point in time when the legislature does convene, we'll talk about a budget. And I know there's a lot of unknowns because of COVID. Next thing on the list, but it'll be interesting to see, again, where some of the initiatives will be from the state, where they come through as far as the Department of Ag and Conservation and Forestry. And certainly it's going to impact our side of things at the university and within Extension and within some of our research and whatnot. We're in winter right now, which I'm a little bit miffed that we don't have more snow on the ground. If it's going to be winter, I can't even cross country ski anymore. I mean, and again, that goes back to climate change. I mean, when growing up, we had 180 inches of snow in Aroostook County most winters. And again, I realize I live a little south of there now. I'm actually based here in Orono, but as I look out my window, I see a lot of ground. And that's going to be interesting, as I said, especially with this industry. Our growing season is we already know it's growing, it's expanding. And what is that going to look like as we think about our businesses, as we think about the extra, and maybe it's only a day, maybe it's only a week, but that is going to make a difference in if people can be outdoors and enjoying the outdoors. And I know I tried to keep my gardens going just as long as I could. And again, I think there's going to be opportunities there. One of the things, and I mentioned this because I think it goes along, especially with you all in this industry and in agriculture as a whole, we don't talk much about water here in the state. We love it. We love our oceans and our lakes and our rivers, but water isn't a commodity here like it is in other states. And I think that's going to be really on the forefront, maybe not soon, but sooner rather than later. I know after the drought of last year, people started saying, oh, we need to probably think about this a little more. And what is it going to mean for homeowners? What is it going to mean for businesses? Is the state, again, going to be proactive and say, all right, we're going to think about water and water issues and how we regulate water before we need to react to the need to do that. And again, I say that having spent 20 years in Florida, where really the decisions that you make in the agriculture sector really have to do with water quality and water quantity. And what does that look like? And so I just say that because I think it's interesting to think about, I think we take it for granted here in Maine that we dig a well and we turn on the faucet and water comes. And well, what's that going to look like in the future? Other than that, like, again, Lee, I appreciate you talking about staffing, but as you think about the upcoming 2021 season, what else is on your mind? Like, what else are you thinking about?
I'm thinking about, well, we're trying to expand our client lists and trying to concentrate more business in the areas we already do. So that's one of my main focuses. Also, when we do garden designs, I'm not part of the installations, but just talking with customers, you were just touching on water. I'm already seeing issues with people and their irrigation systems, mostly people who have extensive lawns during a drought that want to keep their lawns green. It always kills me. And we definitely had some issues where people were on town water and they hiked up the irrigation and there was incredible water bills. I think that woke up a couple of our clients in particular. So I think a lot of it is climate change. And then for us trying to expand our business in the areas we already are so that we're reducing drive time, reducing our carbon footprint, but also concentrating our sales in specific areas.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Irene, as you plan your 2021 season?
Well, we're coming at it from a educational and experiential approach to the visitation at the gardens. So we're transitioning our education from online to online and on-site. But we're keeping in mind of the on-site as all of the protocols that, even though they may get looser towards the middle of the summer, we're still being conservative about it. But we want to also encourage, and I think there's going to be a possible momentum of people wanting to reconnect in person and on site, outdoors, still utilizing the outdoors, but sharing it with other people now instead of just feeling like they can only be in these little bubbles. So there may be a little resurgence of that. But I'm also a landscape designer, and I know that there's going to be a lot of projects down the road that need qualified people. And one thing is that Maine is having difficulty with what Lee is mentioning on trained staffing, trained gardeners. And it's like, and yet we also, and because we have a small population overall too. And the other thing is our borders are still tight. So we don't have a lot of the international integration again this coming year. So those are things that I'm looking at.
Well, and I had to skip ahead from my new normal slide. Social abilities, opportunities and venues for social abilities is a thing. And you just mentioned that people are going to want a chance to be outside of their own pod or bubble with people, but be safe and whatnot. And again, it's interesting because, and I can share my resources where I pulled this from. The opportunities and venues for social abilities came out of, it was a BBC article about the future, and it had nothing to do with gardens or garden centers or, any of those type of things. But I'm like, how perfect are, again, gardens and garden centers and public gardens and whatnot for this to occur. And so I feel like, again, we are well positioned, being the ones that work within, these different areas to provide some of this. So again, I pulled some of these things from several different articles that I'm happy to share. And I just want to mention, I too became part of the gardening culture. And so I spent a lot of time this year. I bought a house in Orono working on my gardens, and they're not by any means professional in nature or whatnot, but I love them. And so this was actually one of my garden beds. It's not very pretty, so no critiquing, but I had my little herb garden and planted some geraniums and had one of my former pets, his rock right there, and it brought me a great deal of joy. So I'm just sharing that on the other side of the screen. But these are some trends that, again, I aggregated from several different sources about what our new normal is going to look like. And I'm kind of sick of hearing about how we all pivoted. I think pivoted is being overused right now. And I think new normal is probably going to get there too. Like, what does life look like? So again, according to my sources, the internet and social media for the exploration of hobbies will continue. I mean, I feel like that was happening prior to the pandemic. It will still continue after the pandemic. But again, how do we take advantage of that? Whether it's through some of our abilities to have classes or garden chats or those type of things. What was interesting to me is they've already started doing some research. Again, pre-COVID, very busy. I'll just use the United States as my frame of reference. Overworked people, have 100 different things going on and whatnot. And what COVID did was, kind of put a halt to a lot of life. And people started doing things from scratch, and they found that they liked that. So it was the making the bread. It was, and again, growing the gardens and doing that. They expect that, again, from my research, that will continue even once we are over the pandemic, that people are still going to want to do things from scratch. We all know that the shift to remote work will we're never going to go back to all working in an office like we used to. Now, certainly some organizations will do that, but I think most organizations have found that actually productivity increased by having a flexible work environment. And that's going to change lifestyles, because as we think about it, especially those people that had, a half hour to an hour commute a day, they're gaining back that time. And what are they going to do with it? They're going to go out, they're going to, get in their garden, or they're going to be able to devote that time to some of the things that they did during COVID. I mentioned climate change before. I have to mention it again, because again, from a state perspective, from a national perspective, and from an international perspective, it's going to drive a lot of the decisions that impact us and our everyday lives. They say, in the articles that I read, they said that air traffic is not going to go to pre-COVID levels for several years. It's going to take people a while to get back into that idea of jumping on an airplane and traveling. We're going to be vacationing closer to home. Maine is the vacation land state. Again, what is that going to look like for us here? Obviously, how we do our business is going to change. Delivery services will continue and probably expand even post-COVID. People have become accustomed to, I can get my groceries delivered, I can get this delivered. And I know, again, a lot of businesses are going to that. And then obviously curbside and pickup services will continue as well. I just saw an article about Starbucks, is that they're going to close many of their actual bricks and mortar store and just have kind of that, pickup window instead of going in and sitting there all day like you used to in a Starbucks. As Irene mentioned, opportunities and venues for social abilities are going to be huge. And where are those opportunities that people can gather and they can, relax and be with people? And man, I think gardens are perfect for that. The digital economy, obviously, that we're going to continue with that, buying things online, no contact, that kind of thing. And again, one of the final articles I read to kind of put this all together is that consumers are going to be more conservative in their spending. And again, this pandemic showed that, yes, you should have an emergency fund. And again, because of all the financial implications, but even when we're past COVID, again, one of the articles I read said people are going to really think about the COVID time and think about a lot of the things that they worried about. And so they are going to be more conservative in their spending. So again, I think as industries, we think about, all right, well, how are we going to still continue to get a piece of that? Or what is our share of that spending? How are they going to prioritize spending on plants or on gardens or on those type of things? And so I think those are important to think about. And then finally, and I'm wrapping up. This has been great, and I very much appreciate everybody's time this morning or this afternoon. It's no longer morning. I put this trivia question out there because I think it's kind of important. But again, I mentioned I spent 20 years in Florida. What is the largest ag industry in the state of Florida? I don't have a prize. I wish I did.
Oranges? Right.
Everybody would think oranges. They're actually, that is incorrect, Irene, but thank you very much for your playing my game.
I'm glad I became your guinea pig.
Right. Oranges. That's what Florida is known for. It's on their license plate. It's what my grandparents used to get cartons of oranges shipped up every year around the holidays. But actually, the environmental horticulture industry is the #1 ag industry in the state of Florida. And it blows. Citrus is actually number 6. The Nursery, Landscape, and Gardening Association industry in Florida is by far the largest. And I think that's important because, and this goes back to my leadership perspective, in Maine, we think of, when people say, what do you think of when you think of the state of Maine? They think about lobsters and blueberries. Again, I'm from Aroostook County. I'd have to add potatoes to that. But there's so much more, and there's so much, if we look at, again, what makes this state the state, what I used to love is in Aroostook County, people's gardens and their flower pots and their porches. And because we had a short growing season, everybody wanted to do something and wanted to do it bigger than last year. And when we think about the beauty of the state, a lot of it has to do with the gardens that are here, whether they're private or public or any of that. And so I feel like it's a really interesting time, and I've shared this with other industry groups as well, is because of this pandemic, as we move forward, what are the industry aspirations? And again, I just kind of throw it out there because I'm sure it's conversations that you all are having, but again, you all are an important part of this state, and your industry is an important part of the economic drivers of this state. And so I just put it out there as kind of just a little bit of a nudge to say, hey, you guys are pretty mighty. And again, what is that going to look like? I think I mentioned this before, I think there are a lot of opportunities to address climate change. My biggest contention is, as we talk about climate change, which I get, they talk about the forestry industry and how, they're offsetting carbon and, you talk about agriculture and you talk about a lot of things. My perspective is, I think we need to be the ones who help homeowners feel like they are making a positive impact on the climate. And I feel like that's a huge, positive advantage for you all, is if you can say, hey, by installing this garden, by thinking about planting this plant, you're actually helping to address climate change. That's going to be key. And I think we need to do more along educating, citizens, educating just our community members. But again, I think it could be interesting as we think about it from a business perspective. We've seen our customer base is going to change. I love to hear the term COVID migrants. Interestingly enough, usually nobody really wants to move to Aroostook County. I grew up there, so I can say it is God's country, but not a lot of people agree with me. But my sister is actually in real estate in Aroostook County, and they can't keep a house on the market there because people want space and they want room, and they realize they can work from anywhere. So why can't I work from rural northern Maine? And so I think we have an opportunity to engage with a whole new population of non-native Mainers. And again, it's a phenomenal opportunity. I mentioned this before. I love generational differences. And interestingly enough, and I had heard this in some of the work that I had done prior to coming here, as we talk about generational differences, but millennials think of plants as pets. And they will name them and they will love them and they will, do all of that, which I find awesome and a little bit just, I want to pat them on the heads and say, that's absolutely right. You think about that. And I mentioned this before, research is showing, and maybe it's because the generation coming after millennials have never had to fail, if you think about it, but they're a little intimidated by plants because they don't want to kill them. They have that fear of failure. So I think this is more fun than anything else, but it's something also to think about as we think about working with the different generations in this regard. And then I also think about partnerships, because again, I mentioned this extension, we've worked with a lot of people that we've never worked with before, and it's fantastic. And I hope that we can actually do more of that, because I think our boundaries have been blurred, and why can't we have a joint position, or why can't we do that? And so I think that's important for all industries to think about, is new partners. And the other thing is, do we really want to go back to how life was prior to COVID? I mean, do we want it exactly the same? Certainly we want to go back to being able to go to the movies and a concert and whatnot. But I do think there are things that happened because of COVID that we may not actually go back to. And so do we embrace some of those things? And then I always have to say this because, again, it's been where my passion has been for the last 20 years is thinking about how, again, I contend that everybody is a leader, whether it's in your family, your business, your community, your industry. And again, as we see in the nation, there is no time that we have needed leadership more than now. So I just encourage everybody to go out and be good leaders. So again, really appreciate the opportunity. Here's my email. I'm really easy to get a hold of. I'm somewhat responsive. I try not to let emails linger too long. So as I mentioned to Dawn, I'm always happy to be whatever resource that I can be to anyone within this industry. So thank you so much again for being part of today and for answering my questions, and Irene for answering my trivia question too.
Thank you, Hannah. Appreciate your time.
Anna, thank you very much. We appreciate you doing this for us, and I will get you at a meeting where we have a number of people in person to get you introduced to them. So
I would absolutely love that when we can be social again.
yes, so will I. Very good. Hannah, thank you so much. And I'm going to leave it up to you to go ahead and end the meeting.
All right, everybody have a great rest of your day and certainly rest of your week. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Hannah. Nice to
Thanks,
meet
Hannah.
you.
Nice to meet you all too.
Bye,